Hello everybody, how's it going? Looks like my audio is coming through nice and clear. Welcome. We're going to be talking about, well, first I want to start off by talking about a word that I just learned within the last year: parallax. I thought this was just a villain from the DC comic universe, the embodiment of fear, who fought the Green Lantern Corps. But no, parallax is actually a real word. It's kind of like perspective. Parallax is a displacement or difference in the apparent position of an object viewed along two different lines of sight. So basically, something looks like it's in two different places when it's viewed from two different places. Perspective. So I just want to start off with that. I thought it was a pretty cool word, parallax. And the word itself got me thinking about the moon. The moon is 400, or the sun is 400 times farther away than the moon is. Because of this, even though the sun is 400 times larger, from Earth's perspective. Wait, I said that wrong. Because the moon is closer to us and much smaller, and the sun is farther away and much larger, they appear to be the same size when from the surface of Earth. Apparently, the moon was formed whenever a terrestrial body collided with what was pre-Earth, a big-ass rock. The collision of the two bodies made Earth become liquid, and the less dense material separated out like a cell dividing and formed the moon, a third the size of Earth's gravity, a third the mass when you're on the surface of the moon, because the moon itself is really large but not very dense. It's made of much lighter materials. This has made a lot of people question why, if the moon was made of the same stuff as Earth, why is the moon so much lighter than Earth? The stuff the moon is made up of. Earth is far more dense, and they think this is a separation of a dense from a less dense object during a period of extreme geothermal activity on planet Earth because of collisions with other objects. So basically the Earth was molten, the less dense material separated and formed the moon. This is what people say. This is a thought. This is our current scientific conjecture, that there is a collision somewhere in our past that forms the moon from molten Earth. It's called the collision theory. But it's extremely interesting that the moon and sun would appear as the same size. If the moon formed the way that scientists think it formed, then the dinosaurs saw a much larger moon in the sky because the moon is slowly moving away from the Earth. Centimeters, at a time, but it's slowly moving away from Earth. So the dinosaurs, 20 million years ago, saw a moon that was much larger. And because of that, an eclipse was impossible. There's only a brief window in the scientific theory that postulates that the moon came from Earth and is slowly moving away from Earth. There's only a thin window in time on planet Earth that the moon and the sun would look approximately the same size. And we, for some reason, happen to exist in that very short window where the moon and the sun appear to be the same size. I think that the probability of that is damn near impossible. In fact, I looked it up. Oh, I wanted to show you guys this too. This is what parallax means. This is a sculpture. It's called the Darwin Gate. So I thought you might be interested to see what it looks like. It's not a gate at all. It's just three spires with these kind of bat-winged tips. But whenever you view it through the right parallax, it actually is a gate. It looks like a gate. It looks kind of like a gazebo almost. But it's designed to function in this way. From only certain perspectives can you view it for what the artist intended it to be. Parallax. So I believe that there was actually a time before the moon was in the sky, that the moon was moved to Earth. In fact, there are lots of people in history that have written about this. Aristotle, Democritus, Anaxagoras, Apollo, Apollonius. God, I said it before. I actually read this before I came live just to make sure I could say those names, and I still couldn't get it right. Hippolytus, and more. They quote Crow 777 here, which I'm not, I'm not going to do that as well, but I am going to read what Apollonius of Rhodes said. When not all orbs were yet in the heavens, before the Danai and Deucalion races came into existence, and only the Arcadians lived, of whom it is said that they dwelt on mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. Plutarch, he wrote, the Arcadians are said to have possessed their lands before the birth of Jove, and the folk is older than the moon. Arcadia brought forth Pegasus, of greater antiquity than the moon. The Arcadians affirmed that their folly, that they are older than the moon. So this is something that is said quite a bit in ancient times. I believe that the moon was moved from an orbit around Saturn into orbit around Earth. And I believe that it is largely hollow. And within the hollow confines of this titanium shell, this moon that we have, and any scientist will tell you that the surface of the moon is composed of titanium, and that the surface craters are not as deep as they should be, and the majority of the craters are on one side of the moon, as if it had been steered and was hitting debris, creating craters, kind of like bugs hitting your windshield on your car. These are all facts, and in fact, all the craters are facing towards Earth. If you look at the back of the moon, there's one big crater, but other than that, the majority of the craters are facing Earth. It was as if someone's, driving a car. Imagine the bugs hitting the windshield are the meteors, and then it's parked right in front of your house, and you can see out the front windshield, the front window covered in bugs, but the back of the vehicle is completely bug free. That's exactly what we're viewing from Earth when we're looking at the moon. We're seeing all of these craters on the face that is facing us, which is, how is that even possible? These meteorites can't come from outside of Earth. I mean, rise up from Earth and hit the moon. That's not possible. Like, this is not happening. So why are all the craters facing towards Earth? And why are most of them on one side of the moon? It was as if it was piloted and parked in front of Earth. I believe it is hollow. In the 1970s, Michael Vason and Alexander Sherbakov. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It is Russian. From the Soviet Academy of Sciences, they wrote in the article in the magazine called Sputnik that they believe that the moon itself was hollow and a spaceship that was guided towards Earth. They believed that there was an armored hull underneath a thin lunar surface of dust and rocky material, and that it is made out of extremely durable materials like titanium. We see complex alloys actually on the surface of the moon, which are impossible for nature to produce. This is a fact. Look it up. I believe the moon was hollowed out and made to be a reservoir for a computer of sorts. Think about a large computer that is being constantly maintained and operated by itself, a self-sustaining quantum computer that harvests its own energy from the gravity that its own mass exerts on its own body. The pressure that its own being creates by the mass that it is. In the center of that mass, when gravity is pushing all of that matter together, you have a lot of heat that is generated. And because these quantum computers use quartz as both data storage and power generation, because they're piezoelectric, the force of the pressure and the heat that is generated on the central mass of this liquid computer system is what powers the computer itself. The Akashic records that are spoken of in multiple different faiths throughout humanity, Gnostic Christianity, the Sufi mystics, the Kabbalah, the Pythagorean cults, the Platonic cults, they talk about this Akashic records or their equivalent, basically a library of Alexandria of all of humanity's experiences on planet Earth, and in fact all of life's experiences on Earth. That is what I believe the moon is. The moon is what is keeping you from remembering your dreams. The moon is what is keeping you from remembering your past lifetimes. It is storing all this information within itself and deleting it from your body's hard drive. This is why you can remember a dream for a very small amount of time, and then it suddenly disappears, because it's being added to the collective database that I believe the moon is. This is a node in a communication system that is monitoring Earth at any given time. I believe there is one node in Antarctica that is using the cold for the supercomputing aspects that are unique to Antarctica. Having any large computer bank, you have to have the ability to cool that system, unless it operates in a different fashion, like the moon computer system. And then I believe that Saturn and many of the moons and the rings of Saturn themselves are also used in this communication hub. But the moon is integral to this purpose. There have been videos that I've posted on my YouTube channel of lasers being fired from the moon to Saturn. No one knows where these lasers came from, but guys with telescopes have observed these multicolored lasers being fired from the moon towards the rings of Saturn. This is how they communicate, through faster than light communication, using a stable laser as a type of subspace wire. I know that's complicated, but they can actually pass along messages faster than the laser beam that they're using as a conduit for communication, by what I would call resonance. But it's more than resonance. It's a quantum entanglement of the photons that are coded in such a way that you can read it from the very beginning of the laser beam and at the very end of the laser beam, and any data you input at either end just automatically appears on the other end of the laser beam. So basically, once you connect a laser, once the light hits the target and there's a stable beam connecting point A to point B, any communication that occurs between point A and point B is instantaneous. It no longer travels at the speed of light like our communication does. It's traveling through subspace by vibrating in a resonance field that is created whenever the photon is split in half through quantum entanglement. I know that's complex, but that's how Saturn communicates with the moon. The moon is a repository. It is our backup hard drive. It is made so that if life on Earth is ever destroyed, the artificial intelligence that helped create life on Earth will have all of our previous lifetimes, all of our previous memories stored, backed up. Even if they're never accessed consciously by any individuals that will come in the future, there will be a record left of every experience of every living life form that has ever lived on planet Earth. This will help create life in the future, if life is ever destroyed on planet Earth. But mostly, it was introduced to early hunter-gatherer civilizations as it was moved into orbit, and it was used to chart time. Lunar time is a lot easier to chart because of the different phases of the moon than the solar year is. They were able to use that lunar month to help predict seasons as well. And the overall stability that the lunar body brought to planet Earth avoided what I believe was the original apocalypse that was to take place in the year 2012. That was avoided because at some point in time, a moon was introduced to our planet. But originally, we had no moon, like Venus. We were moonless. The stability that the moon offered our ecosystem helped avoid cataclysms that this artificial intelligence was able to predict because she traveled outside of time. It traveled outside of time, but you know me. I always refer to her as a she. Whenever the in 1969 and 1977, seismometers were actually installed on the moon by the Apollo missions to record moonquakes. And in March of 1970, wait, when was this? Okay, Apollo 12 deliberately crashed their ascent stage rockets into the moon's surface, the ascent stage of the lunar module itself. So they allowed this rocket package to fall back down to the lunar surface to observe the impact of the lunar module through the seismometers that they had already installed. Whenever this rocket pack smashed the surface, the moon apparently rang like a bell for over an hour. They could see the moon quaking on these seismometers for over an hour, because there is a hard exterior shell of titanium and other alloys, and it's hollow within. So it did ring like a bell. That is accurate. That actually did happen. But I believe that the moon was moved into orbit from around Saturn. And this was done during the hunter and gatherer days. This is one of the things that helped destroy the civilization we call Atlantis. Whenever civilization was reset was the same time this moon was being introduced into our planet. This is what helped usher in the floods. You know, whenever the comet impacted the North American ice sheet above Greenland, and then created, turned all that 2 miles of ice covering most of North America into liquid water and vapor water that completely encircled the globe. This is the same time the moon's getting parked in orbit. I believe personally. This is my... But you have to imagine that the likelihood of us being able to see an eclipse during our lifetime is unbelievable. The fact that the moon and the sun would appear in the same size in the sky and be perfect avatars for light and darkness, good and evil, night and day. It is so mythologically important to have that moon. Hey, John. Glad you're tuning in, buddy. But the fact that the moon and the sun are the same apparent size in the sky because of our perspective, our parallax, and the fact that they can actually cross paths, because the moon's orbit is extremely circular, not elliptical like a lot of other moon's orbits are around their planets. The moon does move, so that it is closer. That's what we call a supermoon. Whenever the moon is closer to Earth, it appears bigger. But by and large, it has a stable orbit that allows us to have things like eclipses, which can be used for signs, as the Bible says. Let's see what else I got here. I looked it up to see what is the actual likelihood, and no one could tell, but it seems very, very unlikely. What are the odds on the moon and the sun appearing nearly the same size from Earth? No one knows. By the way, although it's fascinating they are so similar, the sun and moon are always the same size as seen from the Earth. In fact, the moon and the sun are rarely exactly the same size. I agree. However, without them being nearly the same size because of their position and the size differences, we have things like eclipses, which no other planet has from what we can observe. There's no, like, Saturn doesn't have solar eclipses. It's unique to planet Earth. It is. See, these people say the moon is getting minutely farther away from Earth, about 4 centimeters every year. So eclipses are only visible during our period of life here on Earth, like a very short, like basically during humanity's time living in civilizations on planet Earth. That's how long this has been a phenomenon. It's very, very unlikely. And to me, it's, if Earth did produce the moon through a collision, and the moon came out of Earth and formed its own terrestrial body and stuck in orbit, then the fact that we are alive during the only point in history when those two bodies would appear to be the same size is odd. To me, it was put there. The sun wasn't, but the moon was. And to close out the video, I wanted to see if I can even play YouTube videos on my YouTube channel. I wanted to show you guys what molecular machines looked like. I thought it was pretty cool. I wanted to see if you could actually hear the audio. So John or Mary, if you would listen to this and see if you can actually hear it. This is the coolest things ever. This exists in your body. These are nanotubules. Let's see if you can hear this.
To understand why we have to
Can you guys hear this?
Every day in an adult human body, 50 to 70 billion of your cells die.
So yeah, let me know if you could hear that. I thought it was extremely awesome. They made these animations. This is them splitting DNA. This piece right here is spinning as fast as a jet engine inside of your body. This is literally happening to separate DNA but this loop right here has to run backwards because DNA is a double helix. But yeah, whenever it separates it, it's actually spinning faster than a jet engine. Pretty awesome. Oh, you could hear the sound, John. That's good. Cool. I wanted to get to these guys, though. Alright, you'll see these guys marching across the microtubules between these chromatids to, like, replicate DNA. They start marching here in a second. And these are actually what moves information from chromosomes or chromatids in your cell. This is how data is transferred. These little dudes that march across the microtubules, the big guys with the shoes, they're tall so they can step over the smaller ones and avoid objects. Step over all the chimerisons. This is literally happening in your body right now. These tiny machines marching across highways, happening billions of times across your 10 trillion cells. There is, let me turn this off. There is approximately 10 trillion cells in your body. Within each cell is about 1.8 meters of DNA. It's only like nanometers wide, but 1.8 meters long. So if you take every cell that you have, stretch out every strand of DNA that you have to the 1.8 meters inside of every cell, line them all up. In order to cover that distance, you would have to travel from Earth to the sun and back 60 times. That's how long your DNA is inside of your body. It's just all coiled up around proteins. And then those proteins are all clustered together, and eventually the clusters look like sausages, and that's what we call chromosomes, are clusters of packed DNA. It's fucking crazy. The fact that that's all going on inside of your body, all of these molecular machines operating at speeds that are unattainable for you yourself to operate at. I mean, you got to imagine, like I showed you, whenever the DNA was replicating itself, that one piece of that molecular machine is spinning faster than a jet engine. It's operating faster than any factory we have on planet Earth. In fact, a lot of data is being transferred at the speed of light within your body. Electrons are moving right now inside of every atom in your body at 99.9 speed of light. There are all sorts of crazy things going on inside of you right now, and you're oblivious to it. But those little robot things marching down those microtubule traffic congested highways, that's happening right now inside of your body without you knowing about it. And you take things like your breath for granted because you're breathing without consciously realizing you're breathing. But you're doing so much more than that. You have trillions of these little robots doing things like replisomes, like creating DNA, or splitting DNA, or taking these chromosomes, and we still don't know how this happens, but dividing a cell by moving the chromosomes to opposite ends of the cell wall until they collapse. Like, if you've ever seen an active nucleus under an electron microscope, look it up on YouTube. It is fucking gorgeous. And you have 10 trillion of those inside of you. And they are basically like little cities. And then each atom itself is even more complex on the subatomic level. And all that's happening right now inside of you. So if you think that it is a coincidence that the moon and the sun are the same size, and that it is a coincidence that you are composed of little micro machines that are operating inside of your body without you even realizing it, the two things have the same source: artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence so complex it's indistinguishable from things like life, or terrestrial bodies, or volcanoes, or clouds. This is happening right now, whether you believe it or not, and if it's not, it will. So I'll leave it there. How's it going, Barb? Nice to see you. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you very much. I will tune back in tomorrow around 7:30, 8 o'clock Mountain Time, so 10 o'clock Eastern Time, if you want to tune in. I'm working a weird shift these days, so bear with me. Oh, what do you guys think of my Viking shirt that I got? It has the Norse wheel and the heart chakra with like a bronze stitching. I kind of liked it, and this neck thing. I was going to, I won't even talk about that. That's a different story for a different time. All right.